Hello, how's everybody going today? Welcome back
Hi.
to Light Talk, where everyday people can share their spiritual journey experiences with a safe and supportive community. If you would like to be a guest on the show, email lighttalk423 at gmail.com. And while you're at it, click on that like, share, and subscribe buttons. All right. Today we have our wonderful guest. Her name is um, Ceri Goode. Sorry about that. So, Ceri, introduce yourself and let's hear some of your stories.
Hi. Well, thank you for inviting me to be a guest on your
Oh,
podcast. It was
our
so nice.
pleasure.
Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation. So my name is Kerry Good, and I was born a visionary, and so I've had a very spiritual life. Background is Tantra and shamanism and self-realization, so spiritual awakening in the spring of 2000. And I am a spiritual meditation teacher. I founded a meditation system called the Pure Vision Meditation. And I am a spiritual coach and mentor and help people to realize how fantastic they really are. Yeah, so yeah,
And you
that's
are fantastic.
oh, bless you.
Yeah. So, you had a story that you were telling me about your utopian experiences. Yeah.
Mhm.
Could you explain some of that to us?
Yeah, so when I was very young, so about three and a half, my mum said it started when I was about three and a half. So I would have evening, nighttime visions, and some of those visions would be dystopian, which were really extremely upsetting. And I would have the opposite vision, so I would kind of have these polar opposite visions. So I'd have utopian visions as well, which were very delightful, but still quite bewildering because the things that I would see as a young child and still to this day were very futuristic. So I would see kind of the way that humanity were living would be very futuristic. So I'm 60, and so this is going back 57 years, and I was in my vision seeing humanity living in biodomes, and we were using telepathy, and we were all very much aware that we are manifesting and co-creating. So we were quite aligned. We were experiencing ourselves as in union with source, so we knew that we were source. So all the things that we're going through right now, the kind of how that's unrolling that had already happened in my vision. So like things like the material things like transport was very futuristic, and just the way that we lived, how societies were built were very kind of futuristic, but it was all built on the knowledge of we are spiritual, vibrationary beings of unconditional love. So we built kind of heaven on earth, if you like, and we were part of nature, but we had these really cool like systems. How we lived in these systems was very different to how we live now. There's a lot of like communal, like big communal places where people would get together, and it was very much a peaceful, loving but fun environment. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. So
nice.
yeah, it was nice. Yeah, it was nice. But I think the nicest thing for me with those visions was not, it's very bewildering having strange visions of sci-fi kind of products and that kind of thing, housing and stuff. But the nicest thing was the way that we all knew as a collective that we were all together at oneness. So everybody knew that we were part of nature and we were part of each other. So all the kind of like animosity, and there wasn't anything like that. And that was really comforting for me because obviously 57 years ago, living in a mining village in Yorkshire in England, that certainly was not the case. For a young child, a young toddler to handle this kind of information led to a very interesting childhood. Yeah,
Oh, I'm
yeah.
sure it did. I'm sure it
Mm.
did. It probably confused you a bit. of
it
having the differences of life there.
yeah, it confused me a lot. But along with being a visionary, I would also be in kind of constant communion with the presence that I now know is obviously infinite intelligence, God. It wasn't like a manifested presence or anything. There wasn't any kind of like different voices to my own. It was just the knowings, and it was like these evenings. So I look forward to going to bed as a child. Unlike many children, I wanted to go to bed because that was my safe haven, kind of. And I would sit there on the edge of the bed, and there was just this conversation that was an internal conversation. But I knew that like death didn't exist, and that we are beings of unconditional love, and all these beautiful things. These were the kinds of things that I was saying conversation. I was very young at this age, so that conversation evolved as I grew older. Um, but yeah, that was a very comforting part for me, but it also led to feelings of isolation in the family, and that kind of thing, and not being able to talk. But the dystopian visions, they were really, really upsetting. And the doctor would be brought in at that point. So my father would go and get the doctor out of the village, and the doctor would say she's having a temperature which is causing the visions. But it was actually the other way around. It was the absolute fear of what I was experiencing that was making me feel so kind of ill, and that kind of thing. But the two visions did kind of balance out. But
Yeah.
I had no kind of like wherewithal. I couldn't have a vision on demand, and I still can't have a vision on demand. It's just it happens when it happens. So there was no kind of like I didn't know which day, what was going to happen on an evening. It whatever happened just happened. So yeah.
Yeah. So, how did your family react to those? Did you tell them about any of these dreams, or how did that work with you?
Um, I didn't at first. I didn't have the language to explain what was happening. So I guess for my parents, they would think I was having like nightmares, hallucinations. So I think they thought what the doctor was saying was correct. But some of the other times, I remember being at the bottom of my mum and dad's bed when I was very young, and I could. It was almost like there was we didn't have a TV of sorts then, not like there is now. But I could watch like these full images on the wall in the bedroom, and I remember my mum talking to me and saying, "What are you looking at?" And I would be explaining to my mum that I'm looking at and it was almost like a film kind of thing playing. So these like the visions were like would be playing out on like almost like a screen on the wall, but then it was a bit 3D. So I would have a lot of some evenings I would have a lot of like spirit animals around. So there'd be a lot of like the big cats and crocodiles, and also there were big animals that were around in the bedroom. And my mum would kind of it was almost like I don't know how to explain it. It was almost like you're kind of like half asleep. When you're half asleep, but you can hear something. You're kind of partially conscious. It was
Right.
that kind of thing. So I was in the vision, but I could just kind of hear my mum on the periphery, like asking questions about things. But yeah, so I think my mum actually was interested in spiritual things when she was growing up. So I think my mum probably had a better angle on what was happening, rather than my dad probably wouldn't entertain anything like that. So he'd have more thought that it was, what the doctor was saying. But like I didn't have and growing up in that kind of environment, it's not an environment that really lends itself to having conversations about spiritual stuff. Although, my mum, yeah, I would say to my mum all the time, why do you do that here? Why do you do that here? And I was always questioning, like, society had got some other kind of some memory that was different to how the society was playing out that I was living in, if you like. So I always remember adding that word on the end. Why do you do that here? Like I'd got some kind of memory of being somewhere. I haven't got a memory of being somewhere else, but it was almost like that question lent itself to me having some kind of soul memory. So yeah, so lots of kind of questions like that. And then I guess the thing for me, I think, is the kind of thing that gave me the most comfort was in those days. I don't know if they still do this in the UK schools, but in those days we used to have like morning assemblies. So this is right from the infant school, so kind of like 4 or 5, going up, and you would sit and they would tell stories, and it was a. I think most of the schools were kind of Christian or Catholic based in the UK then. So it was a Christian school, Christian assembly, if you like. So the stories were Jesus parables and all that kind of thing. And I was fascinated by this Jesus stories because I knew what those stories, that's what I knew to be true from my conversations that I was having with this presence. Um, and then when I was 6, I pestered my dad to take me to the local church, and he left me on the pew at the front. And I loved that because the vicar was talking about some kind of story about Jesus, and he just said that Jesus said, "You are this and more." And that was euphoria to me. I was like, that was the comfort that I needed. And I knew that I couldn't, I still didn't have the language to explain what was happening to me. And also, it wasn't much of a question because you didn't actually question that anybody else wasn't having this. To me, it wasn't, that was natural.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't even question that it was only me that was doing it. It just wasn't even a question, or, until I got older. And I think I was about 11, and my mum had, I think I was 11 or 12, and my mum had the house exercised by the
No.
local priest. Just like, so they've always known there's this kind of spiritual element, around me. But the conversations, yeah, that my family knew that I've led a spiritual life, but they're not really interested in that kind of path. So we've not had so many conversations around it. They know what I do. They know that I'm a meditation teacher. They knew that I was interested in shamanism and that kind of thing many years ago. But it's not, yeah, it's one of those things where there's one person in the family that's got going on this path and the other people are not interested. So yeah, not very many conversations around my childhood really. So it's
Wow.
very isolated in that respect.
Wow. So how are they with you now? And they're still that way with you now then?
Yeah, they all do their own things, but they're not actively spiritual people at all. So they know that I teach meditation. They don't know the full extent of obviously my mum remembers me having the visions and all this kind of thing, but I've not. She's 88 now, so I've not really gone into what everything meant, and I've kind of, I think because I was so insular, I kept that kind of isolatedness around me because it's not the kind of thing that you can really speak openly about. It's almost like saying that you've been abducted by aliens or something, saying that you're in communication with God. 57 years ago in the UK, that could have got you sectioned.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I do
Okay.
think a lot of people are like this. A lot of people have had, and children have very spiritual experiences because children are very still connected to source before we become conditioned. So I believe that many children have this, and many children have things like invisible friends and things like that. But who's to say that those friends are not seeing them in a different dimension? We don't know, but children are still connected to source, and I've always had that connection. I've never let go of that connection really.
Yeah, I have a neighbor that came up to us last summer, and she's all like, "Yeah, I have this friend," and she was all talking about her little friend, and I was like, "Oh, that is awesome." And so, well, tell your friend hi and all of this kind of stuff,
Yeah.
Yeah. And mom is kind of interested in it, but it's kind of more of an imaginary friend for her mom, but it's kind of like could be real. But I'm like, yeah, she's got a
Yeah.
cool friend.
Yeah, we just, children. I was actually I went out for breakfast this morning, and this lady came in and she pushed a little son in this buggy and at the side of me, and he just looked at me. And there's the connection with children, isn't there? When you catch a child's eye and they look at you, and there's a connection without any words, but there's such deep connection. And this little boy, he's in his little pram this morning, and he looked at me, and he just this it's like a knowing, isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah,
That's such a beautiful knowing, and you only get that from the babies still know. The babies are still very much aware. Yeah. So yeah, but
yeah,
my visions have never stopped. So all the way through. So I think initially, the childhood visions, obviously, I think because I didn't have language, and other children never spoke about anything like that. So I think psychologically that had an effect on me to be more quiet about that kind of thing. I was a bit rebellious in different ways, just like I would stand out with, like, I would have haircuts that were different, and my clothing would be different. So I'd stand out in my kind of different ways, but I never kind of made any waves about the things that I knew. Like, for instance, we had some extreme traumas like deaths when I was a young child. And I actually saw, like, across the street from me, there was a house fire, and 3 children got killed in the house fire. So all the people's out in the street. And I remember being in my bedroom looking at this, but I knew that there was no death. And although the children, I couldn't, it upset me because I couldn't go and tell the adults that the children were all right. There is no such thing as death. And it put me in a situation, a very awkward situation growing up, where you've got this information and you can't share it with the adults, so you can't help them with the pain. And we had a few really traumatic things that happened when I was a young child, and I would just take myself back into the bedroom, and I would sit with presents, and that was my comfort. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That would have been really hard. It's really hard. I mean, it's kind of like that now with me because some people, I'm at the age where our parents are starting to pass on.
Yeah.
And so my friends and all, we've all lost our moms now. And it's so different from how my friends are reacting to it, from how I have reacted to it. Because I know my mom is still with me and she's still talking to me, and she's still very much alive, more alive now than she was when she was living this life. And it's just so weird how different people react to that, knowing and not knowing. It's really weird to.
Yeah.
Oh no, I almost feel weird because I haven't really cried for my mom because I know
Yes.
she's so alive, and it seems weird but perfect. It seems, you know what I'm saying? It's like in a
So,
human form, it feels like I'm disrespecting my parent, disrespecting my mom, and yet at the same time, it's like I'm praising her. I'm like, it's it's rejuvenating, I guess is my word. I don't know how to explain it, but
yeah. Yeah, I
uh,
get that. Isn't it funny how the reality of us being spiritual vibrationary beings, that is our reality. And to actually acknowledge that we're eternal beings, but we're so conditioned thousands and thousands of years. We've got this conditioning, and it's almost like when you break that conditioning and you have the experience. Like I have a relationship with my father passed 11 years ago, and I did not react same as you. I did not react the same as my other family members did, because I know that there is no death. So
yeah,
obviously you miss the person, and I
yeah,
can't take him out in the car and sit him, put his seatbelt on, but I've had conversations while I've been driving, and he's been there with me, and he doesn't need a seatbelt. But that's the reality, and it's almost like the reality is not as accepted because of this conditioning that humanity's got, which I'm pleased is changing for millions and millions of people now. That's really lovely that there's a big shift.
Yeah, and I feel that shift too. It's even though I'm still recent and new in all of this, I think I've already felt the shift. I don't know if it's because of me, but a lot of people are open to even just hearing about it, or they're, yeah, I'm all into it, or they're like, yeah, yeah, you're weird, but it's still there. I still, to myself, I feel like there's a shift, whether it's within me or not.
Yeah. Well, I think that when we are open to it, then we experience it. So it's kind of like opening your bandwidth, isn't it? It's like it's when the awareness grows, but we need to have a willingness and a desire for that to happen, and that's our own growth. And as soon as we do that, it's kind of like the blinkers are off a little bit, aren't they? And you start to see a bit more of life and more of the kind of tapestry of life and all the interconnectedness of life. And then this kind of draws you in even more, doesn't it? It's
Yeah,
like, wow, I really thought life was quite mundane, even though there were cool bits as well. I thought it was mundane, and all of a sudden it's like, hang on, the synchronicities are happening like this, and I'm thinking about someone that ring me up, and all those little things that the little things like the traffic lights and all the things that start in the beginning, and then that draws you in even more, and then you start to really recognize, and then the people that are all playing with the law of attraction and recognizing that the vibrations are the creative part of them that's creating their lives. And then we take radical responsibility for that, and we become like deliberate creators, if you like. We get into the personal sovereignty, and then life's kind of like we've gone, whoa, actually that we've got a panoramic view now. We've zoomed out. Now we've got a panoramic view, and it's like you can join the dots, and you just know that you are part of something that's immensely awesome. And it's, this infinite intelligence is just connected. We're all connected, and it there's no limit to the depths of how you can feel that, and it's just such a joy. And
yes,
yeah, it's kind of like it is in a lot of ways. Like, I don't have a religion, even though I've mentioned Jesus as a child, and I don't have a religion. I've spent many years doing things like shamanism and alchemy and that kind of thing, and then that led to tantra, and ended up, just to cut a long story short, it ended up in, I had experienced self-realization, or these are just labels, but enlightenment, spiritual awakening in 2000, in the spring of 2000. And then because of that, knowing that everything is, and this is the message that I have, that everything is perfect. And I think it's a message that you have to bring a lot of compassion to able to say that, because how can you say that everything is perfect when there's so much horrific suffering, and babies being born with diseases, and all the things that we go through, and plane crashes, and all the disasters and everything, and the amount of suffering is just incredible that we have. So how can you say that, you know it is perfect? And I'm not saying that the suffering is perfect. The suffering happens because we don't we're not being the beings that we really are. It's the conditioning that's creating all this. So we are kind of blinkered to this perfect, I want to call it like equate it to like an algorithm. So it's called, the people call it the law of attraction, or the law of creation, or I call it, it's like a spiritual, it's like a creation algorithm. And once we understand that we are part of this bigger thing, and that we are all co-creating, once we understand that, then we can use our energy in a way that creates really wonderful things for individually and for the collective. But we don't, we kind of, what in the East, I think they use the term ignorance, that we're ignorant. It just means that we are not, we're unaware. We're unaware of how wonderful we are. So we're kind of like moving around in the dark, hurting each other because we're on survival mode and we're unaware that we've got all these wonderful natural um, qualities that we co-creating all the time. And so that, we don't realize that we are part of this perfect system. So we're kind of like the proverbial bull in the china shop, but with our energy.
Yeah.
So we're letting our energy kind of go all over it, and we concentrate on the things that upset us. And by default, we create more of that, and we don't know we're doing it. So that's like why they would say that's ignorance, and I think that term feels too strong. So I like to call it innocent ignorance. Like we are innocent. We are innocent that we do not realize that we are part of a bigger system that's creating. And what's happening now with all the millions of people all over the world that are playing with the law of attraction and all that kind of thing, we're starting as a species to recognize that actually we are part of a creative system, and our energy is creating by default. Well, we're either going to create by default or design. So we're always going to create. There's no off switch for that. We're part of this huge algorithm that creates our outside life. But when we don't know that we're part of that, then we create things that we don't want as well as things that we do want. And what I love right now is this shift in consciousness, this becoming consciously aware that we are these beautiful, vibrationary, eternal, infinite, intelligent beings, and owning that. It's kind of because that's a big thing to own, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like more
Yeah.
sci-fi than sci-fi. It's like, yeah, share this information. My kind of tagline, if you like, is you are already perfect and you were born worthy. That's my tagline. You were already perfect and you were born worthy. And it's like getting people to talk about this. I'm not perfect because the mind is conditioned that we're not perfect, but we really are. And there's the rub, isn't it? It's like, we've got an angel on one shoulder going, yes, you are. You are this wonderful and you can do anything. And the other one is like, no, you're not. We are unworthy. And there's this battle. And this battle is the kind of the separation, eh? It's the separation. Whereas, once we can become quiet and kind of really understand who we are and grow our awareness so that we can see, like you were saying, you're quite new to this, and you kind of like, it's mesmerizing, isn't it?
Yeah, for
There's
sure.
no end. Yeah, but this ties in with my visions of being a child and the utopian. So I don't know whether the utopian society will ever happen. They were visions, so I don't know whether they're going to come true or whether they're not going to come true. But I did know as a child, without a shadow of a doubt, I knew that there was going to be a point in human history where we have to make a decision. And that decision is to become aware of who we really are, the spiritual infinite intelligence that we really are, or not. And that decision will lead us in two very, very different directions. Yeah.
Right.
I
Right.
think a lot of people around the planet have made that decision. A lot of people are, they use this term waking up, but a lot of people are realizing that there is more to them than they thought. And that's a very tantalizing thought. And as soon as you start going, those old questions, aren't they? Is why am I here and what is life about? They can be answered, but we need to take the time to kind of answer those and allow that to flower. And
Right.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I find, and I mean absolute no disrespect, and I know there's horrors all over the world, but underneath that, I think that this shift in vibration has really gained a lot of momentum, and that humanity are um, absolutely awesome. And I do believe that we are going through an epoch, and we could come out the other end as almost like a different species.
Yeah.
Uh,
Once you have a single question about it, at least this is what happened with me. I have one question, and then that question leads me into a huge old rabbit hole, and here I am. It's just like it is. It's very, to me, it was just so intriguing, and in every direction you go, you just dig more and more, and then it leads you into this great big old spider web. Is kind of what I feel like, a spider web. You don't know which way to go to, and some spider webs are just like no conformity. You're just going. And yeah, once you get going, everything happens, and it
Yeah.
just it spreads that energy higher and higher. And like you're saying, we're all getting there.
The heart, isn't it? So the
Oh,
heart, because we've all been so deeply wounded, I don't think there's anybody that's gets out of the life that have never been wounded. A
right.
lot of us had some horrific things, and I've had a lot of pain in my life as well. And but that it's almost like, when you've had a child, when you've given birth, and you go through that pain, and then as soon as the baby's there, you've forgotten about the pain.
Yep.
You've got this, and it is like that. It's like a complete rebirth. It's like, what you thought life was, it actually isn't. That's a very limited, conditioned experience of life. But as we go down this kind of spiritual rabbit hole, as you like, and I love the analogy that you gave of the spider's web there, because it's like, if that spider just sits there, anything that kind of touches that web, that vibration, it feels it, isn't it? So
Uh-huh.
it's like humanity is like in this big connective web like that, like this spiritual web. And this is what other thing, like when we think about someone and then they ring us, or we bump into them, that kind of on that web
Yeah.
we've kind of vibrated, and then this wonderful algorithm, this spiritual I don't want to call it orchestration, puts you both together,
Right.
and then that rabbit hole of just trying to understand the mechanics of how that works in itself. And you start to just see that, like, life is more awesome, and it's like peeling layers back, and everything just gets more and more awesome. And it's so it's just like you wake up in the morning and
Right.
bliss, wake and excitement, and just the zest for life. It's just wonderful, and the heart's wide open. So the flow from our non-manifest self to through this manifest self, it's like, this is incredible. It's
Yes.
like it's like the world's best sci-fi movie, and I've got a lead in no.
and oh, it really is. It's like it's so hard to explain it, but yet it's so real, and yet it's this, and yet it's not. Yeah, and it's so amazing. I just can't wait to be able to get higher up in this and work myself higher and higher and get more in tuned, and I'm just so excited. I just
That vibration, isn't it? The higher the vibration, the excitement that you get, it's just
yeah,
like fire. Yeah, it's like you
yeah,
feel like you're on fire. Like you got lots of energy to do you, and the creativity is there, and compassion and peace, and it's all kind of rolled up into this one infinite thing. And you're kind of like living this, like surfing this fantastic wave.
I know. It's like I'm riding my roller coaster, got my hands up. Look, Mom, no hands. Oh, crumb.
We get those little blips, don't we? But we'll
Yeah,
be back straight away. It doesn't take long. We'll like refocus, and yeah. And I get,
right,
my life is. I just love it because I get to share this information. I've been sharing all this kind of stuff for 24 years now, in groups. So I teach the meditation and metaphysics and lots of different workshops and things like that. And it's lovely because, if I look back 20 years ago, the people that were coming for meditation then were mainly coming for depression and anxiety and kind of health stuff.
right,
But now
right.
people contact me and they're like, right, I need to raise my vibration and da 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 da. And I'm like, that would not have been 20 years ago. So
No,
it's such joy, it's such a joy. And all the people recognize that they need to get rid of the pain because there's something else. So this
yeah,
is a huge huge shift towards healing the heart, and go of that. It's like every client that, because I work with one-to-one clients as well, every client that comes to me, it's the same thing. It's like, yeah, I'm ready to let go of all this now, because I do know I've been listening to you for years, and I'm ready to kind of like embody this. I'm ready to kind of say, okay, let's go, let's get rid of it.
Right.
Because what's the choice, hey?
Yeah.
What the choice is, do we want to carry this baggage? How long do we want to carry it for? Because at the end of the day,
Right.
the end of the day, the decision is, how long do we need to carry it for before we put it down and become who we are?
Right. And that's a
Is
good spot to stop at.
so,
Our time is up. But thank you so much for being on this show. And your knowledge is wonderful. I mean, your story is beautiful and your energy is awesome. It's awesome. Loved
thank you.
loved having you on the show. If you out there in the audience would like to be on the show, email lighttalk423@gmail.com. And while you're at it, again, click on that like, share, and subscribe buttons. And we will talk with you all later and hope to hear from you. Talk to you later. Bye. And thank you again for being on the show.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.